The young one named Sesh was supposed to be asleep when the Titan came out of the dark. He was 13 turns old by the count of his people, the Oblari, and on the great ring station called Theln he had no real duty yet. He carried water flasks to the censor wardens. He cleaned the long viewing glass on the high deck. He listened. That was all a child was good for, the elders said, and Sesh had decided he would be very good at it. So when the recall bell rang 3 times in the deep of the station's night, Sesh did not run to his sleeping pod. He climbed. He went up the cold service ladder to the high deck, where the wardens watched the stars, and he pressed himself into the gap behind the coolant pillar, where no one ever looked, and he made himself small, and he watched. The wardens were afraid. Sesh could smell it. The Oblari spoke partly with scent, and fear came off the wardens like smoke off a wet fire, sour and thin. They stood around the great glass and they did not speak in their usual lazy way. They watched one bright point that had not been there an hour before. Sesh had a way of listening that the elders did not know about. He listened to the small things. He listened to the way Warden Brask breathed slower when a number on the glass did not fit, and the way Warden Orun went very still when she was thinking hard, stiller than any old shell had a right to be. He had learned the whole shape of the watch by listening, and tonight the shape was wrong. The watch was supposed to be a slow and boring thing, a long count of stars that never changed. Tonight it had teeth. He counted the wardens on the high deck, 6 of them, where there were usually 3. Someone had called the night watch up early. Someone below had felt the wrongness before the glass even showed it, the way you feel a storm in your joints before the first cloud. That alone made Sesh's hearts beat faster, because the council did not wake its wardens for nothing. The council hated to spend a single hour of work it did not have to spend. If 6 wardens stood at the glass in the deep of the night, then something had reached up from below and pulled them there by the throat. It was a ship. Sesh understood that much, but it was the wrong size. The glass measured things for you. It threw numbers in pale light across the dark, and Sesh had learned to read those numbers the way other children learned songs. He looked at the numbers beside the new ship, and he felt something cold open in his belly. The length read 4,040 meters. The old warden, Brask, read it twice, his 3 eyes moving slow, and then he made the small clicking sound that meant a mistake had surely been made. But the glass did not make that kind of mistake. Sesh knew it did not. 4,040 meters. The largest hull in the whole council muster, the proud Kelvrain dreadnought Ascending Crown, measured 910. This new ship was longer than 4 of them set nose to tail, and it was wider than any number Sesh had a name for, and it had come out of empty space where the long-range eyes had shown nothing at all only 1 hour before. Nothing should arrive that the long-range eyes did not see coming. That was the first law of the watch. A whole fleet trailed dust and heat, and the bent light of its drives for days before it reached you. You always saw the storm before the rain. Always. This ship had brought no storm. It was simply there, gray and enormous and quiet, hanging above the ring station Thelm as if it had grown out of the night. Warden Brask sent the question down the line to the council floor, and the answer came back, and the answer was that no one had cleared any such vessel to approach. No flag, no drive song. No name on any list the council kept, and the council kept lists of everything that flew. Sesh heard the wardens whisper that word among themselves, the word for a thing with no papers, the word that in the old tongue meant ghost. Then the second number came up on the glass, and the high deck went very still. The new ship was painting them, not with weapons, with its eyes. A scan had reached out from the gray hull and swept across the whole muster, across all 40 council warships gathered above Theln, across the ring station itself, across the high deck where Sesh hid behind the coolant pillar. He felt nothing. There was nothing to feel, but the glass showed it, a soft wave of light moving over everything, gentle as a hand passed over a sleeping child's face, and Sesh understood that the gray ship had just looked at all of them at once and learned everything there was to learn. The wardens hated being looked at. Warden Brask gave the order to paint it back, to scan the gray ship in return, to learn its shape and its strength as it had learned theirs. The station's eyes reached out toward the gray hull. And then they came back wrong. Sesh watched the numbers, and the numbers made no sense. The hull was 4,000 meters of something the station could not name. Not the alloy the Kelvrain used. Not the woven stone of the Theln rings. The scan went into the gray surface and stopped, as if it had touched a wall behind a wall, and what little came back spoke of layers, and layers under layers, and a cold so deep and so even across the whole hull that it could only mean the ship had been built to hide its own heart from exactly this kind of looking. It did not want to be read, and it had been built, long ago and with great care, by hands that knew someone would one day try. Sesh thought about that for a long time afterward, the cold of it. The Oblari built their ships to be seen. A vessel that hid its own heart from a friendly scan was a vessel built for enemies it had not met yet, a vessel built by a people who had learned, somewhere in their past, that the galaxy would always send its eyes before it sent its guns. You did not armor a heart against looking unless looking had once been the thing that killed you. Whoever had built the gray ship had been hunted, once. The whole hull was a memory of being hunted, 4,000 meters of a lesson learned in blood. The wardens did not say this. They were grown, and grown ones did not say the cold things out loud. But Sesh was a child, and children think the cold things plainly, and he thought it plainly now, pressed to the glass with his small hearts going fast. The Oblari had 3 hearts, 2 for the body and 1, the old song said, for remembering. Sesh felt all 3 of them now, and the third one, the remembering heart, was beating loudest, as if it already knew that this night would be the one it spent the rest of its life carrying. The oldest warden on the deck, a gray-shelled female named Orun, who had watched these stars for 60 turns, said one word out loud. She said the human word, because the Oblari had no word of their own for it yet, and she had heard the humans use it in the old trade talks before the trade talks ended. She said, Titan. Sesh did not know that word. He filed it away the way he filed everything, in the careful, quiet place behind his eyes, and he kept watching. On the council floor far below, the Great Ones were not afraid yet. Sesh would learn this later. He would learn that while the wardens on the high deck smelled like wet fire, the council itself smelled of nothing but its own certainty, because the council had ruled this stretch of the dark for 900 years, and had never once met a thing it could not weigh, name and price. They had a name for the humans, the council did. The name was a small one. The humans were a young species from a wet green world, clever with machines but soft, and they had been pushed back behind a line of dead stars 11 years before by the very coalition that now sat at the council's right hand. The humans had lost that war. Everyone knew the humans had lost that war. The council had the treaty in its vaults, signed and sealed, and the treaty said the humans would build no warship larger than 300 meters ever again. 4,040 meters hung above Theln in the dark and said nothing. Sesh did not know, that night, the whole story of the humans. He knew only the pieces a child catches, the way a child catches the edges of grown talk under a doorway. He knew the humans came from a wet green world far across the dead stars. He knew there had been a war, years before he was born, and that the humans had been on the losing side of it, or so everyone said. He knew that the wardens of the older watch sometimes spoke of the humans the way you speak of a thing you are glad is far away, not with hate, but with a strange, careful quiet, as if the humans were a sleeping animal best not woken. He did not understand that quiet yet. He would, before the night was over. What he understood now was only the size of the thing in the glass, and the smell of fear coming off 6 wardens who were never afraid, and the word old Orun had said, the human word, Titan, which sat in his careful quiet place behind his eyes like a stone dropped into still water, sending its rings out and out and out. Below, the laughter began. It came up the service shafts thin and warm and confident, the laughter of the Great Ones who had never in their long lives met a thing they could not weigh and name and price. Sesh heard it and did not understand it, and his remembering heart beat harder, because even a child knows that when the wardens smell of fear and the masters smell of laughter, One of them has read the night wrong, and it is never the warden's. Sesh, 13 turns old and hidden behind a coolant pillar, watched the great ones below begin to laugh, and somewhere under his fear a small cold certainty was already growing, the certainty that he was about to watch the laughter end. The laughter came up the service shafts from the council floor like warm air, and Sesh did not understand it. He crept to the edge of the high deck and looked down through the inner glass at the great chamber below, where the delegates sat in their tiered rings around the speaking floor. He saw the council as a child sees a thing too big to hold, all at once and not at all. There were the Kelvrain in their pale armor, who built the biggest hulls. There were the Vesh, who counted the money. There were the Sable Coalition at the council's right hand, the ones who had beaten the humans 11 years before, hunters every one of them, with their long jaws and their cloaks that bent the light. Sesh had seen the Sable Coalition before, from a distance, when their hulls had docked at Theln for the great councils. He had not liked them then, and he liked them less now. They moved wrong. Other species moved in straight, honest lines, but the Sable Hunters moved in curves, always sliding, always keeping a part of themselves where your eye was not. Their cloaks bent the light around them even when they walked the station halls, so that a sable was always a little blurred at the edges, a little hard to look straight at, and Sesh had learned as a small child to track them by the cold spot they left in the air rather than by sight. They were the only people he had ever met that you smelled before you saw. The wardens did not trust them. No one trusted them, truly, not even the council that sat them at its right hand. But the Sable Coalition had done a thing 11 years before that bought it that seat, a thing that the whole council had decided to call a victory, and a people that brings you a victory may sit wherever it likes, even at the right hand of those who fear it. It was the Sable Coalition that laughed loudest. Their speaker was a hunter called Dravan, and Sesh would come to know that name the way you know the name of a thing that bites. Dravan stood on the speaking floor with the image of the gray ship hanging above the council in cold light, 4,000 meters of silence, and Dravan laughed at it. It was a trick, Dravan said, a hollow thing, a painted shell the humans had towed out to the edge of council space to frighten children and old wardens. The humans were beaten, the humans were caged, the treaty forbade them this very hull, and the humans, whatever else they were, had always been a people who kept to their cages once you put them there. The Sable Coalition had put them there. Dravan had been there at the putting. So Dravan proposed a thing, and the council, warm with its own certainty, let the hunter propose it. Scan the ghost ship, Dravan said, not gently, the way the wardens had. Scan it hard. Send the deep eyes into it, the war-grade scan that the Kelvrain used to find the weak seam in an enemy hull before they broke it open. Read the gray ship to its bones. Show the whole council the empty space inside, the painted shell, the human bluff. And then, when the lie was naked, the Sable Coalition would tow the embarrassing thing back to the dead stars and remind the humans which side of the line they lived on. The council liked this. Sesh smelled it from above, the change in the chamber, the fear thinning out, and the appetite coming in. They had been frightened for an hour, and they did not like being frightened, and Dravan had handed them a way to stop. They voted with the soft chime of their voting stones, ring by ring, and the vote carried, and the order went up to the Kelvrain flagship Ascending Crown to bring its war-grade scanner to full power and read the ghost. Sesh did not understand then why the small things below did not vote. He had not yet learned that the stone wardens of Thelm, his own people's elders, had sent their voting stone back to its rest without a chime, which in the council tongue meant a refusal so deep it would not even be counted. He learned it years later, reading the knight's record, and it made him proud in a way that surprised him. His own elders, the quiet keepers of the ring station, had looked at the gray ship and at the war scan and had refused, alone among the smaller species, to put their stone behind it. They had not been brave enough to speak against the masters out loud. But they had been wise enough not to lend their voice to the thing the masters were about to do. It was a small refusal, and it changed nothing, and Sesh decided when he read it that it was the proudest thing his people had ever done, because it was the only voice in that chamber that had been afraid in the right way and acted on it. High on the deck, old Warden Orun heard the order come through. She had said the human word, Titan, and now she said another thing, quietly, to no one. She said, "You do not look hard at a thing that is letting you look soft." Sesh remembered that. He did not understand it yet, but he remembered it, because Orun was the only one on the deck who was still afraid in the right way. He moved closer to her, the way a child moves toward the one grown thing in a room that is still acting like the room is dangerous. Orun did not send him away. Her 3 eyes stayed on the gray ship, and she spoke to him low, not turning, the way she sometimes taught him the names of stars on the quiet nights. "You feel that the masters have stopped being afraid," she said. "That is the wrong thing to learn from. A wise creature is most afraid at the moment the danger lets it relax. The gray ship has let us all relax, just a little, by being slow and quiet and willing to talk. And the masters, who do not know fear the way an old warden knows it, have mistaken that mercy for weakness. Watch what they do with the mercy, child. You will learn more about the masters tonight than in all your turns before it." Sesh watched. Below, the masters did exactly the thing old Orun had warned of. They took the gray ship's patience and they used it as a reason to push harder, because to a people that has never lost, patience in another can only mean fear. They could not imagine a patience that came from strength. They had never had to. So they read the Titan's stillness as a beaten thing holding very still and hoping not to be hit, and that reading made them bold, and the boldness made them blind, and Sesh watched the whole chain of it happen and felt his remembering heart go cold. The ascending crown was the pride of the council muster. 910 meters of pale Kelvrain warstone, a dreadnought that had ended 3 rebellions and never lost a tower. Its scanner was a weapon in its own right, a beam of focused looking so fierce it could heat the skin of an enemy hull, peel its secrets, find the place where the armor was thin. The Kelvrain brought it up to full. Sesh watched the power numbers climb on the high glass, higher than he had ever seen them, and the great dish on the crown's spine turned toward the gray ship and woke. The war-grade scan struck the Titan. For one moment, nothing. The beam touched the gray hull and the hull simply drank it, the way dry ground drinks the first of the rain, giving nothing back. The Kelvrain pushed harder. The numbers climbed again. The beam screamed into the gray surface, looking for the seam, the weak place, the hollow lie that Dravan had promised. And the Titan opened one eye and looked back. That was how Sesh would always remember it, though it was not exactly what happened. What happened was this. Along the gray hull, in a long line near what might have been the prow, a single band of light came on. It was not a weapon firing. It was a sensor strip, a great unblinking line of pale white light, and it turned toward the ascending crown, the way a sleeping thing turns toward the small noise that has finally woken it. The war-grade scan stopped. It did not fade. It stopped, all at once, cut clean, as if the Titan had reached out and closed the Kelvrain's eye with one finger. On the high deck, the glass went blank where the beam had been, and Warden Brask made a sound Sesh had never heard a grown Oblari make. Then text came across the council's open channel. Plain text, in the trade tongue every species in the muster could read. Slow and patient, letter by letter, the way you write for a child or for someone you have decided not to kill yet. The text said, "You have scanned this vessel 3 times. Twice we permitted it. The third was a weapon. Do not point a weapon at this vessel again." The council floor went quiet. Even Dravan went quiet, for one breath. Sesh read the words on the high glass twice over, slowly, the way old Orun read the numbers she did not believe. Twice we permitted it. He thought about that. The gentle scan that had passed over the whole muster, the one that had felt like a hand laid soft on a sleeping child's face. The wardens had thought of that as the gray ship's reach. But the word said the gray ship had permitted their scans, the warden's own scan and the soft one, as if the looking had gone both ways, only because the Titan had chosen to allow itself to be looked at. And then the third scan, the war-grade one Dravan had ordered, the one meant to find the seam and peel it, that one the gray ship had not permitted, and that one the gray ship had simply switched off, like closing a door. A people that can switch off the war-grade scanner of a Kelvrain dreadnought from 4,000 meters away, and chooses, for 2 scans, to let you look at it anyway. Sesh turned that over and over. There was a patience in it that frightened him more than any weapon could have. It was the patience of something that had already counted every way this could go, and was only waiting to see which way you would choose. Then the hunter laughed again, louder, because a thing that talks is a thing that can be talked down, and the Sable Coalition had always been very good at talking down the beaten. Dravan stood on the speaking floor and answered the gray ship, voice carried out across the open channel for the whole muster to hear. "You are a painted shell," Dravan said. "You have 1 strip of lights and a clever voice. We are 40 warships of the Council, and the Sable Coalition has broken your kind before. We hold your treaty in our vaults. You will not raise a hull above 300 meters. It says so in human ink. So this thing you have brought us is either a lie or a crime, and either way it is ours now. Power down, open your locks, or we will read you again, and again, and again, until your painted shell falls off, and the whole council laughs at the empty box inside." The Titan was quiet for a long moment. Then a second sensor strip came on, and a third, and down the 4,000-meter length of the gray hull, band after band of pale white light woke and turned toward the muster, until the whole flank of the ship was a wall of cold eyes, and Sesh, watching from the high deck, understood at last why old Arun had been afraid in the right way. The ship had not been showing them its strength. It had been hiding it. The single strip had been a courtesy. Now the courtesy was over, and the gray hull blazed with looking hundreds of sensor bands, and the numbers on the high glass that had read 4,000 meters now climbed again as panels along the hull slid back and the real shape came out from under the smooth gray skin. There were guns under there. Sesh did not have the words for what kind. The glass tried to count them and gave up at 2,000 and then started again from a higher number. There were launch bays the size of the whole ring station Theln. There were towers that turned, slow and certain, each one tracking a different council warship, 1 tower for each hull in the muster, and many towers left over, as if the Titan had counted them long before they had counted it. And the text came again across the open channel, still slow, still patient. The text said, "We came to deliver 1 message and leave. We did not come to fight. The Council has now pointed a war scanner at this vessel and threatened to board it. Under our law, that is an act of war. Under your own treaty, the treaty you hold in your vaults, an attack on a vessel in transit voids the line on hull size. You have just unmade your own treaty. We thank you." There came a small commotion below as the words sank in. Sesh saw it ripple through the rings of the chamber, delegate to delegate, the slow understanding spreading like cold water finding the low places. "You have just unmade your own treaty. We thank you." The Kelvrain, who kept the records, understood it first among the great ones, because the Kelvrain were a careful people who loved the exact wording of things, and they knew that the treaty in the vault said precisely what the gray ship said it said. An attack on a human vessel in transit voided the line on hull size. They had attacked. They had voided it. With their own war scan, in front of the whole muster, they had cut the one rule that had kept the humans small. On the council floor, the Vesh, who counted the money, began very quietly to leave. Sesh saw them go. The money counters were the first to understand, because their whole lives were spent weighing one thing against another, and they had just weighed 40 council warships against the wall of cold eyes hanging in the dark, and the scale had told them which way to run. They slipped from their ring and down the side shafts, and they did not say why, and the great ones did not notice, because the great ones were still looking at Dravan, and Dravan was still certain. That was the thing about certainty, Sesh would think later, when he was old and telling this to children of his own. Certainty was a kind of blindness that felt like sight. The Sable Coalition had beaten the humans once, 11 years ago, and that one victory had grown in them into a law of the universe, and they could no more imagine losing to a human hull than they could imagine the dark catching fire. So when the dark caught fire, they did not see it. They saw only a bigger version of the thing they had already beaten. Dravan gave the order. Sesh heard it carry up the shafts, sharp and glad. The hunter ordered the muster to spread, to surround the gray ship, to bring all 40 hulls into a sphere around the Titan and bring every weapon to bear at once. The Sable Coalition would not be talked at by a beaten people's bluff. They would take the ship, they would tow it home in pieces, they would have its strange gray skin and its clever voice mounted in the council vaults beside the human treaty, a trophy to teach the next young species what happened when you raised a hull above your station. The 40 hulls began to move. Sesh watched them spread across the high glass, each one a careful mark of light, leaving its anchor and sliding toward its place in the sphere. He knew the shapes of them now. The ascending crown, pale and proud and dented, taking the high point. 8 more Kelvrain dreadnoughts, smaller than the crown but still vast, taking the upper ring. The 12 sable hunters, blurred at the edges, taking the flanks, where the bend of their cloaks would do the most. And below them the lesser hulls, the gunboats and the cutters of the smaller council species, the Threll and the Amand, and the quiet stone ships of the Thelm themselves, filling the gaps until the cage was whole. 40 warships. Sesh had never seen all 40 in one sky before. It should have been the safest he had ever felt, surrounded by the whole armed might of the council. Instead, his 3 hearts hammered, because 40 warships were closing a cage around a thing that had switched off a dreadnought scanner with a thought, and a child knows, even when grown ones forget, that you do not feel safe building a cage around something that is letting you build it. And here Sesh saw the first thing he would never be able to explain to anyone who had not been on the high deck that night. As the council warships spread out to make their sphere, the Titan did nothing to stop them. It let them come. The towers turned to follow each hull, slow and certain, but no gun fired, no light flared, no warning was sent. The gray ship simply hung there and let 40 warships build a cage around it, and Sesh, watching, felt the cold in his belly turn into something worse, because he understood that a thing only lets you cage it when the cage is no danger to it at all. The text came one last time before the muster closed. The text said, "We are recording this, not for you, for the ones who will ask after what was said. Let the record show the council was warned twice and chose the third scan. Let the record show we did not fire first. We never do. Hold to that. When you tell this later, it will be the only mercy any of you keep." Then the channel closed. On the high deck, old Warden Orun turned from the glass. She did not watch the rest. She had watched 60 turns of stars and she knew the shape of an ending when it came, and she did not want her last sight of the muster to be its breaking. She found the small shape behind the coolant pillar, the child who was not supposed to be there, and she did not scold him. She put one gray hand on his shoulder. "Watch it all," she told him. "Watch every part. You are the youngest here, and that means you will live the longest, and that means you are the one who will have to carry it. Do not look away. Whatever it does, do not look away. Someone has to remember it true." He looked up at her then, the child to the old warden, and asked the only question a child could ask. "Will it hurt us?" he said. "The station. Us." Orun was quiet for a moment. "No," she said at last. "I do not think it came for us. I do not think it came for any of the small ones who only watch. It came for the masters, and for the hunters at the master's right hand, and for one old wrong that has sat in the vault for 11 years. We are not part of that wrong, child, except that we let it sit there. So no, I do not think it will hurt us. But watch anyway. Watch how it treats the small ones who are not its enemy. That will tell you more about the humans than anything they do to the ones who are." Sesh, 13 turns old, pressed himself to the glass and did not look away. Below and around the gray ship, the 40 warships of the council closed their sphere. The ascending crown took the high point, its pale warstone bright in the station light, its dented scanner dish still smoking from the moment the Titan had closed its eye. The Sable Coalition hunters took the flanks, their cloaks bending the light around them, so the glass had to guess at where they were. The smaller hulls filled the gaps, until the gray ship sat at the center of a perfect ball of guns, 4,000 meters of silence ringed by 40 hulls of certainty. Dravan gave the last order. Fire on the count. All hulls. Break the shell. The count began. And the Titan, which had been still for so long that the wardens had half forgotten it could move, moved. It did not move the way a ship moves. That was the first wrong thing. A ship of 900 meters needed time to turn. It leaned into the turn, fighting its own weight, and you could watch it come around the way you watch a great beast change its mind. The Titan was 4 times that length and many times that weight, and it came around in less than 2 seconds, the whole 4,000 meters of it pivoting on its center as if the dark itself had taken hold of the ship and spun it like a coin. Sesh felt the station shudder, not from a weapon, from the gravity of the thing moving. 4,000 meters of mass changing direction that fast bent the space around it, and the ring station Thelm, 1,000 kilometers off, felt the tide of it and groaned in all its old joints. That alone should have ended the laughter. Sesh thought so, watching. A ship that could turn its own enormous weight that fast was a ship that had solved a problem the Kelvrain had spent 1,000 years calling unsolvable. The bigger a hull grew, the slower it turned. Every shipwright in the galaxy knew it. It was a law as old as the building of hulls. The Titan had broken that law in less than 2 seconds, in front of 40 warships, and the great ones below should have seen in that single turn the whole shape of what was about to happen to them. They did not. They were still counting hulls. 1 ship, 40 hulls. The number comforted them, and the comfort blinded them, and Sesh watched the gray prow come around to face the sphere and knew that the number had never mattered at all. The count from Dravan reached its end. The 40 hulls fired. Sesh saw the muster light up all at once. 40 warships pouring everything they had into the center of the sphere. Lances of Kelvrain warfire, and the bent invisible cutting beams of the sable hunters, and the heavy slugs of the lesser hulls. All of it converging on the gray ship from every side at the same instant. For one moment the Titan vanished inside the light. The high glass whited out. Sesh threw one arm across his eyes. When he looked again, the gray ship was still there. It had not moved from where the fire converged. It did not need to. The fire had not reached it. Around the Titan, a hand's breadth off its gray skin, the weapons of the whole council muster broke and scattered like rain on a roof. Sesh could see the layer now, a faint shell of bent light that the Titan held around itself the way a swimmer holds a held breath. The Kelvrain warfire splashed against it and ran off into the dark. The sable cutting beams, which could open any hull in the muster, slid across it and found nothing to cut. The heavy slugs struck it and stopped dead, hanging for a heartbeat against the shell before they fell away spent. 40 warships fired everything they had at the Titan, and the Titan stood in the center of it and was not touched. Sesh watched Warden Brask read the numbers on the high glass and then stop reading them, because the numbers had become meaningless. There was a measure on the glass for how much fire a shell could turn before it failed. Every shell had a limit. The Kelvrain shells, the best in the council, could turn perhaps 1/10 of what 40 hulls were throwing before they broke and let the rest through. The Titan's shell was reading no strain at all. Not 1/10 held, not half held, all of it held, and the meter that should have shown the shell straining toward its limit sat flat and calm, as if the whole fury of the council muster were no more to the gray ship than a warm rain. There was no limit on the glass because the glass could not find one. The shell was not being tested, it was barely being noticed. On the council floor, the laughter stopped. The text came across the open channel one final time, and after this, there would be no more text, only the doing. The text said, "That was your shot. We let you have it whole, all of it, so that no one could ever say you were not given the chance to land it. You have landed nothing. Now we deliver the message." Then the Titan answered. Sesh had braced himself for a wall of fire to match the one the muster had thrown. He had braced himself for the gray ship to light up the dark with its 2,000 guns and burn the whole sphere to vapor in one terrible flash. That was what a council ship would have done. That was what the Sable Coalition would have done, in the old war, 11 years ago, to the humans. The Titan did not do that. The Titan was precise. A single tower on the gray hull turned, slow and certain, and fired one shot. Not at a ship, at a place. The shot crossed the sphere and struck the empty space at the exact center of the muster's formation, the keystone point where Dravan had ordered all 40 hulls to anchor their firing line, and where the shot struck, the dark folded. Sesh did not have words for it then. He would not have them for years. The shot did not explode. It collapsed. It pulled a small piece of space into itself and let it go, and the letting go sent a ring of bent gravity out through the muster's formation, and the formation came apart. Not destroyed, undone. The careful sphere of 40 hulls that Dravan had built was shoved out of true all at once, hulls spinning off their anchor points, firing lines crossing, the whole beautiful cage knocked loose with a single shot that had not touched one ship. Sesh thought about that shot for a long time after. It was the cleverest cruel thing he had ever seen done gently. A wall of fire would have killed the muster, yes, but it would also have given the muster a death it could understand. A soldier's death, a thing the Sable Coalition could carry home as a battle lost to a greater foe. The Titan did not give them that. It reached into the one thing the muster was proud of, its formation, its discipline, the careful sphere Dravan had built, and it took that away with a single shot, the way you might pluck a single thread from a garment and watch the whole weave fall open. It did not break their ships, it broke their order. And there is no death more shaming to a proud people than to have its order undone in front of it, while every one of its ships still flies. The masters did not understand it as shame yet. They were still reeling, still trying to find their anchor points, still shouting down the channels to reform the line. But Sesh, watching from above, saw the shape of it, and he saw that the gray ship had chosen this on purpose, the breaking of order over the breaking of hulls, and he began to understand that he was not watching a battle. He was watching a lesson, taught by a teacher who had decided that no one needed to die to learn it. And then, while the muster reeled, the Titan went to work on the guns. It was the most terrible thing Sesh had ever seen, because it was so calm. The gray ship did not rage, it did not pour fire, it selected. One tower, one shot, one weapon. A lance of pale, precise light reached out from the Titan and touched the great scanner dish of the ascending crown, the war-grade eye that had read it without leave, and the dish came apart into drifting metal, clean as a cut, and the rest of the crown was left whole. Then the next tower fired, and the main gun spine of a sable cruiser folded into ruin, and the rest of the cruiser drifted on, blind and toothless and alive. Sesh understood, slowly, what the Titan was doing. It was disarming them. 40 warships, one weapon at a time. The Titan was reaching into the muster and taking away its teeth, gun by gun, dish by dish, with shots so exact that the hulls themselves were left whole and the crews inside them untouched. It was not killing the Council. It was unmaking the Council's ability to fight, and it was doing it faster than the muster could understand it was happening. The precision of it was the part that frightened Sesh most. He had seen weapons before, on the practice ranges where the wardens trained, and he knew that even the best Kelvrain gunner missed, that fire spread, that a shot meant for a gun spine often took the deck around it too. The Titan did not miss, and the Titan's fire did not spread. Every shot went exactly where it was meant to go and nowhere else. A gun ended here, a dish ended there, a launch rail cut clean from a hull that lost not a single plate of armor beside the cut. To shoot like that, once, would have been the finest gunnery Sesh had ever heard of. The Titan did it 40 times over, on 40 moving hulls, in the dark, through cloaks, while it was being fired upon from every side, and it did it so fast that the towers seemed to be choosing their targets and firing in the same motion, as if the ship had already decided every shot before the battle started and was only now playing them out. Old Arun whispered the answer beside him, half to herself. "It is not aiming," she said. "A thing that aims can miss. This is not aiming. This is a creature so far past us that hitting and not hitting are the same to it, the way breathing in and breathing out are the same to us. We are watching a god do arithmetic, child, and it has decided the answer will be no one dead." The sable hunters tried to cloak, Their great gift was the bending of light, the trick that had won them the human war, the way they could fold the dark around their hulls and vanish from any eye. Dravan gave the order, and the coalition ships dropped into their cloaks all at once, 12 hulls gone from the glass in a breath, and for one moment Sesh thought, "There, that is how they will live. They will hide." The Titan turned every one of its sensor strips toward the empty places where the cloaked ships had been, and on the high glass, where the cloaked hulls had vanished, 12 red marks bloomed, sharp and certain, one for each Sable ship. The Titan could see them. Whatever the Sable Coalition had built into their cloaks to fool the eyes of the galaxy, the gray ship looked straight through it, as if the cloak were a child's hand held over a child's face, as if the Titan had known this trick before the Sable Coalition was a people, as if somewhere in the long memory of the humans there was a file on exactly this, and the Titan had read it on the way here. One by one, the Titan took the guns from the cloaked ships too. It did not punish them for hiding. It simply found them and disarmed them and left them drifting, cloaked and blind and harmless, hiding from an eye that had never lost them. This was the part that broke the Sable Coalition. More than the turning of their formation, more than the bending of their fire. The cloak was everything to them. It was their pride and their religion and the whole of their war. 11 years ago they had crossed the dead stars under their cloaks, and the humans had not seen them coming, or so the coalition told it, and that one advantage had been the thread on which their entire victory hung. The Sable Hunter did not fight in the open. The Sable Hunter appeared out of the bent dark beside you, took your throat, and was gone before your eyes found the place it had been. Take away the cloak, and a sable was only a long-jawed thing with a gun, no better than any other, and worse than most, because it had never learned to fight a foe that could see it. The Titan saw them. The Titan saw them as easily as Sesh saw his own hand in front of his face, and worse than that, the Titan let them know it saw them. It did not have to. It could have killed them blind, in their cloaks, and let the rest of the coalition wonder where its hunters had gone. Instead, it painted them red on the open glass, 12 marks for 12 ships, so that the whole council and the hunters themselves could watch the cloaks fail, could watch the one thing the Sable Coalition believed made it untouchable become, in an instant, the thing that made it most visible of all. It was a cruelty made entirely of light and truth, and it did not spill a drop of blood, and Sesh understood that it would hurt the coalition longer than any wound. Dravan broke. Sesh heard it carry up the shafts, the speaker of the Sable Coalition shouting orders that no longer made sense, ordering the muster to do things it no longer had the guns to do. "Ram it," Dravan shouted. "Ram the gray ship, all hulls, drive your prows into its skin and break it with your weight." It was the order of a creature that had run out of every other order, and the muster, what was left of it, tried to obey. 3 hulls turned their prows toward the Titan and pushed for ramming speed. The Titan let 2 of them come close. It let them come so close that Sesh, watching, was sure the gray ship had at last made a mistake, that the weight of the council hulls would finally find its skin. Then the shell of bent light around the Titan flexed, just slightly, the way a still pond flexes when you set a leaf upon it, and the 2 ramming hulls slid aside, turned by the bend of space, and passed the gray ship by a hand's breadth, and went tumbling off into the dark, prows untouched, never having landed the blow. Sesh watched the 2 ramming hulls go tumbling off into the dark, spinning slowly, their crews surely thrown about inside but alive, and he understood the mercy of even that. The Titan could have let them strike the shell and shatter on it. It could have turned their own charge into their death and called it their fault, for they were the ones who chose to ram. Instead, it had bent the space around itself so gently that the hulls were merely turned aside, like a grown hand turning aside a child who runs at it. No harder than that, no more harm than a child gets from being set back on its feet. There was a tenderness in it that did not belong in a battle, and that was exactly why it was so frightening, because tenderness in a thing that powerful is a choice made fresh in every single moment, and a thing that chooses tenderness in every moment can choose to stop in any moment too. The 3rd hull was the Ascending Crown. The pride of the Kelvrain, blind now, its scanner gone, came at the Titan with all its weight, 910 meters of warstone driving for the gray ship's heart. And the Titan, for the first time that night, did a thing that was almost gentle. One tower turned, and fired, and the shot struck not the crown's hull but the great drive at its tail, and the drive went dark, all at once, leaving the crown coasting toward the Titan with no power to push and no power to stop. The gray ship simply moved aside, the whole 4,000 meters of it sliding out of the crown's path with that same impossible quickness, and the ascending crown sailed through the place the Titan had been and out into empty space, powerless, drifting, whole. Then it was over. The part with the guns. Sesh looked at the high glass and saw the muster as it was now, and it was a graveyard of living ships. 40 hulls, every one of them still flying, every crew inside still breathing, and not one of them with a working weapon left. The Titan had walked through the council muster like a grown Oblari walking through a room of children with knives, taking each knife from each small hand, hurting no one, until the room was full of children and empty of knives. It had taken 6 minutes. Sesh had counted them, the way old Arun had taught him, one breath at a time. 6 minutes for one human ship to disarm 40 warships of the Council and the Sable Coalition, the same coalition that had needed 3 years to push the humans behind the dead stars 11 years before. 6 minutes, and the gray ship had not killed a soul. Sesh would do the arithmetic many times in his life, and it never stopped astonishing him. 40 warships, more than 30,000 crew across all of them, by the Council's own rolls. Every one of those 30,000 had pointed a weapon at the gray ship and fired it. Every one of them, by the laws of every people Sesh knew, had earned death in that firing, had made themselves an enemy of the Titan with their own hands. A council ship in the Titan's place would have killed all 30,000 and called it lawful. The Sable Coalition in the Titan's place would have killed them slowly and called it justice. And the Titan had killed none of them, not one, had reached into a sky full of 30,000 enemies and taken away their power to harm and left every single life intact, and had done it not because it was weak, not because it could not, but because it had decided, somewhere far off on a wet green world, that this was the kind of thing it wished to be. The not killing had taken more skill than the killing ever would have. It is easy to destroy 30,000. It is the hardest thing in the dark to spare them. On the high deck, old Warden Orun made a low sound, and Sesh realized it was the sound the Oblari made at a holy thing, the sound from the deep songs, the one you were not supposed to make outside the temple rings. He had never heard her make it. He looked at her, and her 3 eyes were wet, and she was not afraid anymore. "It is not killing them," she said, very quietly. "Do you see, child? It could have ended all of them in the first 2 seconds, and it chose not to. It is showing them. It is showing the whole council exactly what it could do, and then not doing it, so that everyone who watches will know that the not doing is a choice. There is nothing in the dark more frightening than a thing that can kill you and decides, in front of you, that it will not." Sesh watched the gray ship hang in the center of the broken muster, calm and gray and patient, and he understood that the message Dravan had laughed at had not been delivered yet. The disarming was not the message. The disarming was only the clearing of the throat. The real message was still coming. And on the council floor below, in a chamber gone silent as a tomb, the great ones who had laughed 1 hour before now sat very still and waited, like children, to be told what the gray ship had crossed the dark to say. The channel opened again, but this time it was not text. This time the Titan spoke with a voice, and the voice came into the council chamber and up the service shafts and onto the high deck, and it was a human voice, a woman's voice, calm and even, and tired in a way Sesh did not yet have the years to understand. It was the voice of someone who has done a hard thing many times and takes no joy in doing it again. She gave a name first. She said the ship was the Titan-class battleship Sufferance, out of the human world they called Earth, and that she was its captain, and her name was Captain Idris Vane. She said the name the way you set a stone on a grave, plainly, so it would be remembered. There was a sound under her voice that Sesh noticed, and did not understand until later. It was the sound of a crew, Not loud, just the low breathing presence of others around the captain, the soft work of people at their stations, a cough, a quiet word passed and answered. The gray ship was not a machine that had crossed the dark alone. It was full of humans, hundreds of them surely, perhaps thousands, each one a living thing with a name and a home on the wet green world, each one of them able to feel fear and choose past it. Sesh had half believed, watching the disarming, that the Titan was a thing with no people in it, a cold mind in a gray shell, because nothing with people in it could be so calm while 40 warships poured fire on it. But there were people in it. He could hear them, and they were calm not because they could not feel the fire, but because they trusted the ship and the captain and each other so completely that the fire was, to them, only weather. That was the most human thing of all, Sesh thought. Not the guns, the trust. Then Captain Vane told the council why the sufferance had come. 11 years ago, she said, the Sable Coalition crossed the dead stars and made war on the human worlds along the rim. The council called it a border matter. The council let the Vesh sell the coalition the fuel, and the Kelvrain sell the coalition the hulls, and the council looked the other way, because the humans were young and far off, and there was money in the looking away. For 3 years the coalition burned the rim worlds. They took 11 of them. On the last of the 11, a green world the humans had named Holomere, the coalition did a thing that the council's own records, sealed in the council's own vaults, described in cold clean words, and then never spoke of again. Captain Vane said the name Holomere, and on the council floor, Sesh saw the Kelvrain delegates lower their pale heads, because the Kelvrain kept the records, and the Kelvrain knew what was in them. Sesh did not know, that night, what had been done at Holomere. He was glad of that, later. He learned it only when he was much older, when he was a warden himself, and had earned the right to read the unsealed vaults, and when he read it, he had to set the record down and walk a long while in the cold halls of Thelm before he could pick it up again. The humans had named that world Holomere because of its quiet lakes, and the coalition had made it hollow in truth, and the cold clean words in the Kelvrain record did not soften it, they only made it worse, because a horror written in the careful hand of a clerk who felt nothing is a horror twice over. Sesh would not tell the children that part, when his turn came to tell it. Some things a child should hear only the shape of, and not the whole. But the chamber knew, that night. The oldest of them knew, the ones who had voted 11 years before to call it a border matter and look away. And Sesh saw the knowing move through the rings of the council like a sickness, head after pale head lowering, because the gray ship had not come to accuse them of anything they did not already carry. It had only come to say the names out loud, in the one place that had spent 11 years agreeing never to say them. The humans did not lose that war, Captain Vane said. That is the lie the council tells, and it has told it so long it believes it. The humans were not beaten. The humans agreed to stop. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole of why this ship is here. When the coalition reached the inner human worlds, it found that the humans had begun to build, and what they had begun to build frightened the coalition so deeply that the coalition offered terms. The terms were a treaty. The treaty said the humans would raise no hull above 300 meters, and in return the coalition would cross the dead stars no more. The humans signed it, not because they were beaten, because the alternative to signing it was that the humans would finish building, and the humans did not want to finish building, because the humans knew what the finished thing would be. The humans had seen, in their own long and bloody history, what their kind did when they stopped holding back. They had spent 10,000 years learning to hold back. They signed the treaty to keep from becoming the thing the treaty was holding back. Sesh felt the strangeness of that settle into him as he listened. Every other people he knew of grew strong and then used the strength, because that was what strength was for. That was the whole reason you built it. The Sable Coalition built cloaks and crossed the dead stars with them. The Kelvrain built the biggest hulls and ruled the inner rings with them. The Council built its lists and its vaults and weighed the whole galaxy with them. Strength was a thing you spent. But the humans, this one human voice said, had built the most terrible strength in the dark, and then spent 10,000 years learning not to spend it, had built a thing that could wake dead stars, and then signed a paper promising to keep it small, not because anyone forced them, but because they were afraid of what they would become if they ever let it loose. That was the quiet Sesh had heard in the older wardens whenever they spoke of the humans. It was not the quiet of fearing a strong enemy. It was the quiet of fearing a thing that fears itself. Because a thing that fears itself has looked into its own heart and seen something worth fearing. And a people honest enough to admit, that is a people you should never, ever give a reason. "You held that treaty in your vaults," Captain Vane said, "and you called it a leash on the humans. It was never a leash on the humans. It was a leash the humans put on themselves and handed you the end of, because they trusted you to never give them a reason to take it back. Tonight," she said, "you gave them a reason." Sesh listened, pressed to the glass, and he began to understand the shape of the terrible thing that had happened in this chamber. Dravan had ordered the war scan. Dravan had threatened to board. And by the Council's own treaty, the one in the vaults, an attack on a human vessel in transit voided the line on hull size. The Council had not just woken the gray ship. The Council had, with its own laughter and its own certainty and its own war-grade scan, cut the leash that the humans had spent 11 years keeping fastened to their own throats. The sufferance was the proof that the humans had never stopped being able to build. They had only stopped. And now, because of one night, because of one hunter's certainty, they had a reason to show what stopping had cost them, and what unstopping would mean. The name of the ship, too, Sesh turned over in his careful, quiet place. Sufferance. He did not know the human word at first, and old Arun told it to him later. The two meanings of it the humans had folded into one. To suffer was to hurt. But to do a thing on sufferance was to do it only because another permitted it. To live, or pass, or stand only by the mercy of one who could have refused. The humans had named their most terrible ship with a word that meant both at once, and Sesh thought that told you everything about them. The gray ship was made of the suffering the humans had carried out of the rim worlds, yes, but it was also a ship that meant to make the whole galaxy understand that it lived now on sufferance, on the mercy of a thing that could end it, and chose, every day, not to. The humans had taken the word for their own pain and turned it into the word for everyone else's reprieve. That was the whole of what they were. Sesh would spend his life understanding it. "I want you to understand what this ship is," Captain Vane said. "She is one ship. There is no fleet behind her. We did not bring a fleet because we did not need one, and because we wanted you to see the truth plainly. One Titan came to your muster tonight. We have not built a second. We do not want to build a second. Everything you have just watched, the disarming of your 40 hulls, the seeing through your cloaks, the bending of your weapons off our skin, all of it was done by one ship that we built reluctantly, that we kept hidden, that we hoped to never sail. We sailed her once," she said, "to tell you this, and only this. You will leave the human worlds alone. You will leave the rim worlds the Coalition took, and you will give them back, every one, with everyone still living on them returned. You will strike the lie from your records and write Holomere true, and you will never again sell a hull or a drop of fuel to a people crossing the dead stars to burn the young. And in return," Captain Vane said, "we will go home, and we will put the sufferance back in the dark where we keep her, and we will fasten our own leash to our own throat again, and we will trust you, one more time, to never give us another reason. That is the message. That is the whole of it. That is what we crossed the dark to say." The chamber was silent. And then Dravan, the hunter, the speaker of the Sable Coalition, who had laughed loudest and lost most, stood up on the speaking floor of a chamber full of disarmed ships and unleashed pride, and Dravan did the thing that Sesh would tell children about for the rest of his life, as the moment he learned what certainty really was. Dravan refused. "You have one ship," Dravan said, and the hunter's voice shook but did not stop, because a creature like Dravan would rather break than bend. "One ship. You said it yourself, human. One ship and no fleet. You can disarm us, yes. You can see through our cloaks, yes. But you cannot hold the whole dark with one hull. The moment you sail home, the Coalition rebuilds. The moment you sleep, we cross the dead stars again. You have shown us a great and terrible thing tonight, human, but you have also shown us its limit. You are one, we are many, and the many always, in the end, outlast the one. On the high deck, old Warden Orun closed all three of her eyes. She knows, Sesh thought, watching her. She knows what the gray ship will say now. She has lived 60 turns, and she knows the shape of this. He looked at Dravan, down on the speaking floor, and he tried to understand the hunter. Even a child could see that Dravan was not stupid. The hunter had watched the same 6 minutes Sesh had watched, had seen the formation undone, and the cloak stripped, and the weapons taken from 40 hulls without a single death. Dravan knew, surely, in some part, what stood in the dark outside. And still the hunter refused, and Sesh understood at last that the refusal was not about the gray ship at all. It was about Dravan. The hunter had built a whole self on one truth, that the Sable Coalition was the thing that won, that the cloak always closed the throat, that the many outlast the one. To accept the human terms was not to lose a battle, it was to discover that the self had been built on sand, and a creature like Dravan would rather break the whole world than discover that, would rather call the gray ship's mercy a weakness than admit there was a kind of strength its whole life had never imagined. That was certainty, not knowledge, the refusal of knowledge, the choosing of the comfortable lie over the terrible truth, even with the truth burning in the dark right in front of your eyes. There was a long pause. When Captain Vane spoke again, her voice had not changed at all, and that was the most frightening thing of the whole night. More frightening than the wall of cold eyes, more frightening than the 6 minutes of disarming. Her voice did not rise, it did not harden. It stayed tired and even and calm, the voice of someone explaining a thing to a child for the last time. You think the limit of one ship is its number, Captain Vane said. That is your mistake. It has always been your mistake. You count hulls, because counting is how your kind makes itself feel safe, and so you look at one ship and you think, one. But you have not asked the only question that matters, which is what kind of one. Let me show you, she said. What kind? And the sufferance did one more thing, the last thing, the thing that ended it. It reached out, not toward a ship, but toward the dead stars, toward the empty stretch of dark, between the council muster and the human worlds, the long graveyard of burnt-out suns that the Sable Coalition crossed to make their wars, and the gray ship sent a single beam out across that whole distance, light years of it, and where the beam reached the dead stars woke. Sesh did not understand it. No one in the chamber understood it, but they all saw it, on every glass in the muster, a thing that should not have been possible. 11 dead suns, 11 burnt-out stars, strung along the graveyard road that the Coalition used, kindled one by one as the Titan's beam touched them, not exploded, lit, brought back to a low, steady burn, 11 cold dead stars made warm again. In a line, a wall of new light strung across the only road the Coalition had to the human worlds. The humans had not just built one ship, Captain Vane said. The humans had spent 11 years learning to do this. To wake a dead star, to close a road. We did not bring a fleet to hold the dark, because we do not need to hold the dark. We have closed the door. The dead stars between you and us burn now, and they will burn for 10,000 years, and nothing crosses a burning star. The road the Coalition used to reach Hollowmere is gone. We unmade it tonight while you watched us disarm your guns, and you did not even notice, because you were counting hulls. So count again, Captain Vane said. Count the road you no longer have. That is the kind of one we are. The chamber did not breathe. Sesh watched the rings of the council stare at the wall of new stars on their glasses, 11 dead suns burning again across the only road that mattered, and he watched the number that had comforted them all night finally turn to ash in their mouths. One ship. They had said it like a charm against fear. One ship, 40 hulls, the many outlast the one. And the one ship had reached across light years of dead dark and lit 11 graves and closed a road no fleet in the council could ever have closed, and it had done it as an afterthought, while it disarmed them, without raising its voice, and now the word one meant something it had never meant before. It did not mean small. It did not mean alone. It meant a single thing so far beyond them that its loneliness was a choice, the way its mercy was a choice, the way its stillness, all that long hour had been a choice. The humans were one, because they had decided one was enough, and it was. Dravan did not stand up again. On the high deck, old Warden Orun opened her eyes, and she looked at the line of new stars burning across the dark, 11 of them, a wall of light where there had been a graveyard road, and she made the holy sound again, low and long, and this time Sesh made it with her, 13 turns old, and weeping, and not ashamed, because some things are too large to watch with a dry face. The council voted before the new stars had stopped climbing toward their burn. It was the Vesh who called the vote, the money counters, the ones who had slipped out of their ring early and now came creeping back, because the Vesh had weighed the new wall of stars the way they weighed everything, and the scale had told them the only sane thing left to do. They called the vote, and the vote was to accept the human terms whole, every line of them, with no debate, and the chamber that had laughed 1 hour and 40 minutes before now passed the thing in silence with the soft chime of the voting stones, ring after ring after ring, until even the Sable Coalition stones chimed, because Dravan sat with his head down and did not stop them. All but one term were easy. The rim worlds would be given back, the people taken from them would be returned, the records would be struck, and Holomir written true, in the Kelvrain's own careful hand, in the vault, where the lie had lived for 11 years. The selling of hulls and fuel to the crossers of the dead stars would end, and there was no road left to cross anyway, so the term cost the coalition nothing it still had. Sesh watched the voting from above, and he watched the masters change as they voted. He had thought, when the gray ship first came, that the great ones were one thing, all certainty, all appetite, a single hungry mass. He saw now that they were not. The Vesh had been the first to understand because they weighed everything, and weighing had saved them. The Kelvrain understood next because they kept the records, and the records had always known the truth even when the speakers lied. The smaller species, the Threll and the Amond and the quiet stone wardens of Theln itself, they had understood from the very start, because the small always understand a thing the great cannot, which is what it is to be small in front of something vast. Only the Sable Coalition, and the few great ones who had grown fat on the Coalition's victories, had needed the road to burn before they would bend. That was a thing worth knowing, Orun told him after, about any people that calls itself a council. It is never one mind, it is always a fight between the part that wants to weigh the truth and the part that wants to keep the comfortable lie, and the gray ship had not changed the council so much as it had ended that fight, all at once, by making the lie too heavy for anyone to carry. After Holomir was written true, the part of the council that had wanted to look away had nowhere left to look. The last term was the hardest, and it was not a term the humans had asked for. The council added it themselves. They voted to take the human treaty out of the vault, the one that called itself a leash on the humans, and they voted to burn it, not because the humans demanded it, because the council had finally understood what the treaty had always been, and a people cannot keep, in its own vault, a thing it has finally understood. The treaty had never leashed the humans. It had only recorded the humans' mercy, and you do not keep another's mercy locked in your vault, as if it were your own power. You give it back, and you say thank you, and you try very hard never to need it again. They burned it on the speaking floor, in front of the open channel, so the sufferants could watch. And the gray ship watched, and said nothing, and when the ash had settled, Captain Vane's voice came one last time across the channel, and it was not tired anymore. It was almost gentle. "Thank you," she said. "We did not want to sail her. We will not sail her again if you let us keep the trust. Go and give the rim worlds back. Go and bring the taken home. And if any of you ever stands in this chamber again, and is tempted to laugh at a young people from a wet green world, remember the road you no longer have, and remember that the humans closed it without raising their voice, and remember that the mercy you watched tonight is the only thing standing between you and the kind of one we could have been." Then the sufferance turned, 4,000 meters pivoting on its center in less than 2 seconds. the station groaning in all its joints, and it pointed its gray prow toward the new wall of burning stars and the human worlds beyond, and it left the way it had come. It did not flash a drive. It did not trail heat or dust or the bent light of its going. It simply receded, smaller and smaller against the new line of suns, until the high glass could no longer tell it from the dark, and then it was gone, and the only proof it had ever been there was 40 disarmed warships drifting whole above the ring station Theln, and 11 dead stars burning where a graveyard road had been. On the high deck, no one spoke for a long time. Warden Brask was the first to move. He went to the great glass and he ran the numbers one last time. The numbers that had read 4,040 meters, the numbers that had refused to count the guns, the numbers that had found no limit on the shell. And then he did a thing Sesh had never seen a warden do. He wiped them. He cleared the high glass of every reading the gray ship had left, slowly, with his own three-fingered hand, until the glass showed only the stars and the drifting disarmed hulls and the new wall of fire across the dead road. When Sesh asked him later why he had wiped them, Brask said only that some numbers were not meant to be kept. There were measures, he said, that a watcher took not to remember them but to be sure, once, that they were real, and then to let them go, because to keep them was to spend the rest of your nights staring at them. The gray ship's numbers were like that. Brask had needed to see them once. He never wanted to see them again. Old Arun did not wipe anything. She only stood and watched the empty dark where the sufferance had been, and after a long while she said one more thing to Sesh, the last thing she would teach him that night. "The masters will tell this story wrong," she said. "Give them a year and they will say they faced down a great human warship and won terms from it. Give them 10 and they will say the burning of the road was a gift the humans gave them in friendship. The great always lie about the moments they were small, because they cannot live as the great while remembering they were ever small. That is why I made you watch, child. Not the masters. You, the small ones, remember it true, because the small ones were never too proud to be afraid. When you are old and the master's lie is everywhere, you will be one of the few who still knows what really happened in this sky tonight. Carry it. It will be a lonely thing to carry. Carry it anyway." Sesh stood at the glass with old Warden Orun's hand still on his shoulder, and he watched the place where the gray ship had been, and he felt the thing he would spend the rest of his life trying to name. It was not fear, though there had been fear. It was not joy, though something in him was singing. It was the feeling of having watched, very close, a thing that could have ended you and chose, in front of you, not to. It was the feeling of being spared by a hand large enough to crush you, and knowing, all the way down, that the sparing had been a choice, and that you would carry the weight of that choice for the rest of your days. Arun told him, much later, that there was a word for it in the deep songs. The word meant the gratitude that frightens you, the gratitude you feel toward a thing so far above you that its mercy is the only reason you are alive to feel it. The Oblari had a word for it because the Oblari were an old people, and old peoples have words for the largest things, and Sesh thought that maybe the humans had a word for it too, because the humans seemed to be the kind of people who would. The Rim Worlds came back, in the turns that followed. Sesh was there, years later, a warden himself by then, on the high deck of Theln when the first of the returned worlds sent its first free ship through the muster, a battered colony hauler full of people the Coalition had taken from Holomere 11 years before and never expected to see the sky again. They came through slow, the freed ones, and they did not understand at first why the wardens of Theln stood at the glass and made the holy sound as they passed, the low, long sound from the temple rings. Sesh understood. He had been 13 turns old on the night the gray ship came, hidden behind a coolant pillar, and he had not looked away. He went down to the docks himself, that day, to meet the colony hauler. He was a warden now, and he did not have to, but he went, because old Arun had died 2 turns before, and someone had to carry the holy sound to the freed ones, and Sesh had decided it would be him. He stood at the foot of the ramp as the people of Holomere came down into the light of Theln for the first time in 11 years, thin and blinking and afraid, and he did not know how to tell them what he knew. So he told them the only true thing he had. He told them that a gray ship had crossed the dark for them, had stood in a sky full of laughing masters and not laughed back, had taken the teeth from 40 warships and the road from the people who had hollowed their world, and had asked for nothing in return but that they be allowed to go home. He told them the ship had a name, and that the name meant both their suffering and their reprieve, and that the humans had folded those two things into one word because the humans understood, better than any people Sesh had ever heard of, that mercy and pain are carved from the same stone. The freed ones did not fully understand him, but one of them, an old one, took his hand and held it, and that was enough. The Sable Coalition did not rebuild. There was nowhere to cross to, and there was nothing left to prove, and a people whose whole pride had been the crossing of the dead stars found, when the dead stars burned, that it had to learn to be something else or be nothing at all. Some of them learned. Dravan did not. The hunter who had laughed loudest left the council within the turn and was not spoken of again, and the Sable Coalition that came after Dravan was a quieter thing, smaller, that kept to its own stars and sold no hulls to the burners of the young. It was not redemption, it was only the end of an appetite. But the end of an appetite, Orun told Sesh, is sometimes all the mercy a hard people can hold. The humans were never seen at the council muster again. They had said they did not want to sail the sufferance, and they meant it, and they kept their word the way they had kept the treaty for 11 years, which is to say completely, with no one watching to make them. No second Titan was ever built, as far as the council ever learned. The gray ship went back into whatever dark the humans kept it in, and it stayed there, and the wall of burning stars between the human worlds and the rest of the dark stood and burned and held, year after year after year. A door closed not with a fleet, but with a single ship that had chosen mercy over the killing it was plainly able to do. There were some, in the turns after, who said the humans should have stayed. The council was weak, they said, and the humans were strong, and a strong people that loved mercy as the humans loved it could have set the whole galaxy right, could have ended the appetites and the burnings and the looking away, could have ruled the dark wisely and kindly for 10,000 years. Why go home? Why close the door and sleep? A people that could wake dead stars could have woken a better order out of the ashes of the old one. Sesh thought about that often, and in the end he believed he understood it, and his understanding was this. The humans went home because they knew the one thing the would-be rulers never know, which is that there is no mercy in ruling, no matter how kind the ruler. To rule is to decide for others, and to decide for others is to take from them the thing the humans valued most in themselves, the choosing, the holding back, the right to be small and free rather than safe and owned. The humans had spent 10,000 years learning to hold their own strength back from their own throats. They were not about to clamp it onto everyone else's. The gift they gave the galaxy was not a wise ruler. It was a closed door and an open question, the question of whether the rest of them could learn, on their own, with no gray ship standing over them, to be afraid in the right way. The humans went home so that the answer would be the galaxy's own, and not theirs. That was the last and largest mercy, and it was the one the council understood least, because it was the one that asked the most of them. That, in the end, was the thing Sesh tried to make the young ones understand, when he was old and gray-shelled himself, and stood where Orun had stood. They always asked the wrong question first. They always asked how strong the gray ship had been, how many guns, how thick its skin, how fast its turn, and Sesh would answer those, because the answers were true, and the young ones deserved the truth. 2,000 guns, and more. A skin that bent the fire of 40 warships off itself like rain. A turn faster than the dark itself. All true, but that was never the lesson, Sesh would tell them. The strength was never the lesson. The coalition had strength. The council had strength. Strength is common in the dark, and strength alone has burned more worlds than it has ever saved. The lesson of the gray ship was not that it was strong. The lesson was that it was strong, and chose not to use the worst of that strength, in front of everyone, when no one could have stopped it, when the easiest thing in the universe would have been to end the 40 hulls in the first 2 seconds, and call it justice. It disarmed 40 warships and killed no one. It saw through every cloak and punished no one for hiding. It closed a road instead of burning a people. and when the hunter who had laughed at it refused its terms and called it weak for being one, it did not rage and it did not boast. It simply showed, calmly and completely, the kind of one it was, and then it went home, and it did not stay to rule the people it had just spared, because ruling them had never been the point. There is nothing in the dark more powerful than a thing that can do anything and chooses to do only the kind thing. That was the lesson. Sesh had learned it at 13 turns old, behind a coolant pillar, with old Arun's hand on his shoulder, and he spent the rest of his long life trying to be worthy of having seen it. The young ones never liked that ending. They wanted the gray ship to win the way the Masters won, with fire and ruin, and a sky full of broken hulls, because that was the only kind of winning the songs had taught them. They wanted the Sable Coalition burned for what it did at Hollowmere. And Sesh understood that hunger, for he had felt it himself, at 13, watching the disarming, some small dark part of him wishing the Titan would simply end the hunters and be done. He told the young ones the truth he had learned instead. He told them that anyone can burn the wicked. The Coalition burned the wicked, by its own reckoning, every time it crossed the dead stars. Burning is the easy answer, the cheap answer, the answer that feels like justice, and leaves you in the end looking exactly like the thing you burned. The gray ship had refused the easy answer. It had taken the harder road, the road of mercy that costs more than vengeance ever could, and it had walked that road in front of 30,000 enemies without once stepping off it. That, Sesh told them, is the only winning worth singing about. Not the burning, the not burning, when burning was yours to do. Some of the young ones understood. Most did not at first. But Sesh had not understood at first either, and he had grown into it across a long life, and he trusted them to grow into it too, because the gray ship had trusted the whole galaxy to grow into it, and who was Sesh to ask for more certainty than the Titan itself had been willing to ask for? On the last night of his wardenship, very old now, Sesh climbed the cold service ladder to the high deck of Theln one more time, the way he had on the night the gray ship came. The new stars still burned along the graveyard road, 11 of them, steady and warm, the door the humans had closed and never reopened. He stood at the great glass and looked out at them, and he made the holy sound, low and long, the gratitude that frightens you, and he was not ashamed of the wet in his 3 old eyes, because some things are too large to watch with a dry face, no matter how many years you carry them. Somewhere out beyond the burning stars, on a wet green world the Oblari had no real word for, the gray ship slept in its dark, exactly as it had said it would, leashed by the very hands that could have ruled the galaxy with it. And the galaxy, which had laughed at it once, slept easier for knowing it was there. Sesh climbed down the ladder for the last time, and he found the youngest warden on the deck, a small one not yet 10 turns old, who was not supposed to be there, hidden behind the coolant pillar where no one ever looked. Sesh did not scold the child. He put one gray hand on the small shoulder, the way Orun had once put hers on his, and he pointed out at the 11 burning stars. "Watch them," he said. "You are the youngest here, and that means you will live the longest, and that means you will be the one who has to carry it. There was a ship once. It was gray, and it was 4,000 meters long, and it came out of the dark on a night like this one, and the whole council laughed at it. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what kind of one it was. And do not look away, child. Whatever you feel, do not look away. Someone has to remember it true.